the past maybe 2 years, I haven't felt really good. Something's, I think, physically kind of, I don't know what it is. I'm doing like a lot of blood work and doing all these different therapies and like trying to kind of figure out why I don't feel as good as I used to. I physically don't feel good. Mm-hmm. So the hardest thing sometimes is when you don't feel good to go into an environment and put yourself out. It's like you almost want to hide from people when you don't feel good. You want to wait till you feel okay to get out there and like, you know. So that's been one of the most challenging things is on weeks where I don't really feel that great to put myself out, put myself right there. It's like sometimes you're like, man, I don't want to see people to see me not at my best, especially when the only thing I've always had is my own image, how you see me. It's like it makes it real dicey sometimes. But at the same time, man, I've learned a lot about people through podcasting, you know. I'm just enamored sometimes of the people that come out and the really nice stories that they share, you know. And then people will share stuff with me that means something to them sometimes. Like some guy came up to me this morning at the cafe and said, hey, man, I got 5 years sober, you know. And you're just so excited when you see how somebody's life gets different or better. And not that I have anything to do with that. I don't feel like I do. But just that he wants to share that with me and that he feels okay sharing it, you know. Things like that, man. That's one thing I've learned, I think, through podcasts, and is really a power of, even though it's not real human connection, it's not the hand-to-hand combat of human connection because we're through microphones and stuff. It's been surprising to me how many people connect, you know, and how many people feel and how much feelings you can get through stuff. It's pretty remarkable sometimes. So anyway, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but
yeah, it's interesting because you were joking around earlier about how you're sorry not being funny right now on this podcast. You're supposed to, and that's what's interesting about that is you have some pretty serious stuff that you do on your podcast. You have some, you kind of sometimes you open up about stuff and how you're feeling, and maybe it's not feeling that good. And again, I think that people tune into that because, look, man, I guess you could try and like fake being funny or fake being in a good mood, but I don't think you can really fake it 100% where people really believe it. And I think it's better that you just be who you are, and if you got something, if you feel like freaking depressed or whatever, then you're like, hey, this is what I feel like right now, and it makes people comfortable that there's someone like you who's usually funny and seems to have a pretty good life, and all of a sudden they're like, hey man, this is freaking hard right now for whatever reason, whatever that reason might be. And I think when people just knowing that someone else is kind of like there with them, it's reassuring.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's interesting about this is you've been saying this whole time, that you have a hard time with relationships and long term and all this. But how long have you been doing your podcast for?
For maybe 5 years.
So 5 years. And this is the thing about podcasts, and I have the same thing where I meet people that listen to podcasts and they feel like we have a relationship.
Yeah.
And they're right.
Right.
Because you don't I mean, my podcast is 3, 4, 5 hours long.
Jesus
I don't
Christ,
freaking
dude.
sit down.
Now I see what happened to you. Yeah, you said things probably years ago, and there's just not much in there. I bet if we tickle you, we'll get them out, you creep.
How often do you sit down and talk to anyone for 3 hours or 2 hours?
Oh, I walked out of Joe Rogan, and I remember telling him, I said, hey, that's the longest conversation I've ever had in my life with anybody, especially with a man. Like I didn't have any male figure. I had, there was no male figures in my neighborhood. One guy shot up a ready-med 24-hour clinic, and that was like the toughest dude we knew, and he was on pills, so he wasn't even really doing it out of his own heart. So, we didn't have a lot of, so I think, yes, I've found more probably male influences through podcasting than anywhere else in my life, really, which is kind of interesting.